Clint Emerson, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Brett, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be back.
Yeah, so it's been about a year since we had you on the show. You came out with your book, 100 Deadly Skills, the SEAL Operative's Guide to Eluding Pursuers, Evading Capture, and Surviving Any Dangerous Situation. And we got a lot of positive feedback from that episode. People loved it. And your book has gotten a lot of positive feedback with the rest of the public. This was a book that became a New York Times bestseller, sold like hotcakes. What do you think accounts for the popularity of this kind of subject? Where, you were in the first book, you were talking about how to do anal concealments and how to survive, active shooter situations, which I can understand because that's a thing, or like how to bury a dead body. I'm sure a lot of that stuff was fun, but there's a lot of actually practical information in there. But what do you think what itch are you scratching here with the book?
Well, with that first one, as you noted, it had some taboo stuff, and taboo sells. But the bigger piece of it is it followed the theme of a violent nomad, which is, trying to push people to be a little more self-reliant, be more reliable on themselves, vice relying on 911 or people around them, and kind of give them some skills that are, nefarious in nature, and most of them developed by bad guys. And the goal really was, hey, if you know the bad guy's offense, then you can create a better defense. This is the basics to, solid warfare. So that first book certainly hit a bunch of stuff that was entertaining, but at the same time informative. And that's kind of the overarching goal is you want to give people information that's, easily remembered and digestible, and, give them just what they need to know without all the other rhetoric.
And do you have any ideas sort of what your readership was like? I'm sure if it made the New York Times bestseller list, that doesn't mean it was just like the survival prepper guys that were buying it. These were like average Joes from every walk of life, I imagine.
Yeah, it became there's some strategy, as with books, coming out in October before the holiday season. It's a great stocking stuffer, but at the same time, you got a group of men that have it sitting next to the toilet, and then you have families that have it sitting on the coffee table, and then you have people that travel business that carry it with them everywhere they go. And I was surprised by the number of females that enjoyed the book because they felt like all those skills is something really anyone can do. And I think a majority of the people that bought it were also looking for something new. If you look at, yesterday's survival books, they really don't cover today's threats. And between, the first book and now definitely the second one, you've got 200 solid skills that really become a playbook when dealing with any kind of crisis or threat that may come walking your way.
Right. So yeah, you got a second book out. Again, like with the first, you teamed up with Ted Slampyak, the guy who does a lot of our illustrations on the art of manliness. It's 100 Deadly Skills, Survival Edition, and concentrates, as the title says, on being prepared for surviving just about any scenario in the wild, in urban areas, in your home. So first question there is, I think you kind of mentioned it earlier that the yesterday's survival book they're kind of outdated. So how does the modern landscape make survival a more complicated business than, say, 20 years ago, or even like going back, to primitive times?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One, the bigger issue these days is complacency. And I think we touched on it last time. I know I touched on it with everybody I've talked to. And we are leashed to technology. And between technology and just natural human behavior to take shortcuts and be lazy, and always looking for the answers at our fingertips, has really just sucked all of our basic human instincts, kind of away from us. And, when you talk about old school survival skills that, our fathers and our grandfathers used to know, and it was kind of just common knowledge. Today, no one really knows how to do it anymore, nor do they want to learn it because they feel like they can just Google it. And, but the problem is when the lights go out, the power goes down, or, bigger state-sponsored cyber attacks start to emerge, you'll find yourself in a very primitive situation, except the difference is you won't have the knowledge. You won't know how to deal with it. There's been, plenty of natural disasters, like you compare it to something like Katrina, where they were surrounded by water, but none of it was drinkable, and no one knew really what to do with all that water in order to make it drinkable. So, even though the book breaks out skills in the wild, the reality is the wild can be in urban environments. It just really depends on the crisis that brings it in.
Right. That point about cyber attacks, that's interesting, because I think that's going to be a bigger problem. We just experienced one a few months ago that took out a big portion of the internet. Like, I know it affected our store. There was a DDoS attack, and our store was down for pretty much the entire day.
Yeah. I think, we don't give it the credit it deserves. And when you talk about state-sponsored stuff coming our way, whether it's Russia or China, or even if it's just, organizations that are, anti-USA, people forget that it's their cyber infrastructure that controls water, transportation, power grids. All of it can be hacked and then turned off in a split second. And then that's when you're left with, now what do I do? You can't use your devices, you can't log in, you can't get on your computer, you can't even turn on the lights. Those are those moments when you might want to have some skills in your back pocket.
Right. So to counter that, to be ready for those situations where the wild comes to you, right, for whatever reason, you advocate for people to make themselves crisis proof. So let's talk about mindset of becoming crisis proof. What is the mindset that people need to develop in order to become crisis proof, as you say?
Yeah, we talk about awareness all the time, but really it still anchors to that. You have to start paying attention. The way I break down awareness is, your personal awareness. That's your projection and demeanor management, how you dress, how you walk. A lot of things you write about, what makes a man. And how do you do that without your ego dressing you each day? Our egos dress us and want us to, basically be different than the person next to us on the subway. And when in reality, you got to be the gray guy. And so it all starts with your personal awareness, we're literally looking in the mirror and going, all right, what am I telling everyone by what I'm wearing, how I talk, and what I do, my mannerisms. And then from that, then you get into like third party awareness, understanding that people are looking at you, watching you all the time. And they're forming opinions and judging you without even knowing you. And I think we all know that occurs, but you can manipulate it to a certain degree, especially when we're talking about man versus man type threats out there. And then you have situational awareness, which, I think is overused verbally, and, we always articulate, situational awareness, but how often do people actually become more situationally aware? And how do you make it a habit, like putting on your seatbelt? There was a time when no one wore seatbelts, and they put annoying buzzers inside your cars, and then you can get a ticket. And then over time, it's become something you do and you don't even know you do it. And that's kind of where you got to get awareness. It's not about, okay, I'm going to pay attention all day today, because that's energy consuming. You have to kind of piecemeal it a little bit, like, all right, on the hour, every hour, especially while I'm driving, I'm going to kind of look around and make sure I know what's going on, and slowly introduce it into your world so that it then becomes a habit more naturally. And then of course, cultural awareness. So, what's going to offend people, what doesn't offend people, and making sure you understand the do's and don'ts to the geographical location you're standing on. If you combined all of that together, now what are you doing? You're projecting something much different. You're paying attention to things. You're actually getting educated to a certain degree on kind of the do's and don'ts, whether it's third-party awareness or cultural awareness. And before you know it, mentally now you are, these are all kind of like things you can control. And now you're reducing all of your threat vulnerabilities and hopefully reducing crisis, because, most of the time the clues and the cues are right there staring us in the face. And it's not until after the event, the incident, or the crisis that you go bang your head against the wall going, God, I saw that coming, but I did absolutely nothing about it.
Right. So it's a great breakdown of the mindset. I mean, what about the like big picture skills, right? So the skills you need for different situations are going to vary, right? Whether you're in a desert situation, or you're surviving a tornado, or you're surviving a riot or whatever. But I mean, are there bigger picture skills that can cross over to all these different domains that you need to have in your back pocket?
Yeah, I think, when we're talking mentally, this is something that's not going to be conditioned just by reading a book or overnight. It's a level of confidence that you've got to have, knowing that, all right, you've got some sort of education in different, whether it's using the 100 Deadly Skill playbooks or, experience that, that you've accumulated over your life. You combined all that together, and it's all about the confidence that you have when you face these events and taking control of what you can control. It's the only things we can truly control when it comes to any kind of event is preparation and response. And so mentally, you're literally running through, okay, what can I do right now when I have plenty of time and zero stress that can make me more effective, more efficient, increase survivability when something bad happens? That's all about the prep. There's things you can do, and there's a way that you can think about things. You can what if it, and run scenarios. Then on the response side, which is the other piece you control, those are decisions that you've already made, and now all you do is act them out when a good day goes bad. And so I think if people are mentally, immersing themselves into that what if worst case scenario, okay, what can I do to prep for something like this, whatever that event is? And then how would I properly respond to it? Geez, you've just done far more than the average person to be prepared for that event. And not only are you preparing yourself, now you probably have thought about, well, okay, it's not about just me, it's also my family or maybe the people around me. And you're actually, doing something instead of just sitting there.
Right. So it sounds like you're getting your OODA loop in gear before the event actually happens, before you have to make a decision.
Oh yeah, you definitely, the OODA loop's great for, dealing with whatever's going on at that moment. But yeah, you certainly, it's a proven fact that you do not want to make decisions in crisis. You want to have that stuff already figured out. So all you do is act on those decisions. Any decision made in crisis is going to be a 50-50 chance. Whereas if you kind of think them through and have your decisions already figured out, when you've got more of a clinical, where you have plenty of time and zero stress, that's the ideal spot to make your decisions. And then if something bad happens, you're good to go.
Right. So let's get more specific here. Specific tools and skills a man would want to adopt to learn in order to increase his preparation for a crisis. So in the book, you go over gear and skills for every environment, from the desert to the Arctic to the sea and more. But let's start at home. You have a section devoted to your home, because that's where stuff can happen. Disasters can happen. We talked about an everyday carry last time for the violent nomad to consider. But you talk about in the book creating a tactical nightstand. So what items should a guy have close at hand for his tactical nightstand?
Well, the one that's illustrated in the book and what I talk about is kind of overkill. So
yeah, it was a lot of stuff.
It's giving people options, right? We have, varying degrees of, people. So, you have lethal, non-lethal means of dealing with, let's say, an intruder. And so you want your nightstand to kind of represent and have readily available. You take your nightstand, you really look at it as, your kit, right? You can use it. A lot of guys already do this, but I kind of wanted to formalize a little bit with options. So, you've got to have basic life support, basic defense stuff. You got first aid, you can have that there. You can have everything from a baseball bat to, a firearm of some sort. And then of course you can have, like in the illustration, I got body armor, you've got, everything from, I would always pick bear spray over something like mace. Bear spray has that distance. It's got a more potent level of pepper in it. and still just as, if not more effective than, mace that, squirts. You got to be you got to be very intimate with someone to get that mace across. Whereas with bear spray, you can shoot it 30 feet away. And if you don't have any of those, then I have some improvised stuff like wasp spray or oven cleaner. These are going to cause permanent damage to a guy. But if he's in your house, then he deserves it. But the big legal takeaway from that is, don't think for a second if you use wasp spray or oven cleaner and you carry it in like your purse or in your car, well, now you're talking about that's actually breaking the law. Most people think that would be okay if you can use mace, but it's a difference between pepper and chemicals. So when it's your own house, your own domain, you can get creative with how you need to take care of an intruder and what you put in your tactical nightstand.
Right. So you need a concealed wasp spray to walk around the city with your wasp spray can.
Yeah, a concealed wasp spray license, right. Yes. Otherwise, it's illegal, and that's kind of, most people don't know that. So, whatever you use to defend your home is going to be 100% legal, no matter whatever it is, because it's your home, it's your domain. But as soon as you take some of those creative ideas outside your home, you can actually go to jail for it.
All right. So don't get creative outside your home. Well, the other thing on there that I think is extremely useful and completely underrated is a flashlight on your nightstand.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, I've got some interest in the zero trace flashlight, which is, it's waterproof. You can beat people's skull with it and it still works. It's bright as hell. And, so there's so many things. A lot of people want to turn on the lights when they hear a noise in their house. Reality is your blueprint better than anyone else. So keep that advantage for you. Keep your lights out. Using a flashlight, you don't want to use it like a spotlight and light everything up, because it's giving up your location. It's giving a bad guy a place to shoot. So you want to use it sparingly, and you also want to hold it away from your chest. Get it out and away from your body when you're using that flashlight, because if shots are fired, you want them to go, high and right, vice, at your torso. And a common mistake is to kind of, hold it at chest level and point it out in front of you. But that's literally just giving bullets, a place to fly to, and you don't want to do that. But you can also use it as deception too. You can use it to blind a guy and then quickly move. You turn it on, turn it off, and move out of the way in order to give yourself different advantages tactically if you're having to deal with an intruder in your home. But the book certainly lays out, and of course Ted did a great job depicting, the kind of like day and night with his illustrations. Even though the book is kind of, black and white drawings.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about home invasion, right? This tactical nightstand is there in the event that someone comes into your home illegally to do you and your family harm. So, how often do home invasions occur? Is it a common thing, or is it pretty rare?
It's actually on the rise right now for some reason. You're hearing more and more reports of it. And what used to be, there's two kinds of predators, really, and this is very general, but it's a good rule to follow. Anybody who's coming to your home during the day wants your stuff, right? Burglars attack homes during the day because they know everybody's at work and at school. There's, it's more predictable. Whereas someone coming to your home at night typically wants you or wants to harm you. So that's your two divisions there between day and night. And, how you deal with that obviously is going to be dependent on who you are and where you live. And, but the goal is having a plan, having some things prepped, having a proper response, and then, having to deal with that as it comes. I talk about fortifying the home, and it's more than just your property. There was plenty of times overseas before we went into a target. Some targets just knew we were coming, no matter how great we were at being stealthy or, clandestine with our movements and our actions. And the reason being is because, people overseas still operate and, know that it, quote unquote, takes a village. And so they're watching. Everyone's looking out for one another. And it seems these days in our neighborhoods, no one really even talks to each other, much less have each other's phone numbers so they can text one another if they see something strange in the neighborhood. So that's where I begin is, hey, start talking to your neighbors, start building, some alliances with one another and start looking out for each other so that if something strange rolls through the neighborhood, you can let everybody know. And second to that is, I put in there, me as a professional predator, I'd look at targets, determine their vulnerabilities, and then figure out how best to exploit them. And so I put the reciprocal of that in the book, and it's all about lighting up the exterior of your home. The more light there is, the better, because that makes anybody creeping up to your house feel completely vulnerable and naked to a certain degree, and they wouldn't want to deal with it. If you talk to like professional burglars, they avoid homes that have like toys in the front yard because kids are unpredictable. They avoid homes with dogs because no one wants to deal with a dog. They avoid homes that have signage in the front yard, that says alarm system, that's clearly visible from the street. You don't want someone coming up to your door to determine whether or not you got good locks or a security system. You don't even want them, you want them to keep them as far away as possible. So a lot of people will focus on locks and I got an alarm system, so I'm good to go. But both of those systems are literally tested. The bad guy has to test that. It means he's already too close. And we don't want anybody getting that close. We don't even come in our front yard, so you want to push people out with some of these tactics. And for all the single women that potentially are listening, I always say, put a pair of size 12 athletic shoes right at the front door to keep the sexual predators away,
All right. So you want to, light is key.
Illumination is definitely the number one, when we're talking about, at night, people sneaking up and doing whatever it is they're going to do. And during the day, having if they, I don't even know if they make big wheels anymore, but it doesn't matter if you're a parent or not. You've got some kids' toys out in the front yard. That'll keep most of your professional burglars away, because it's just, once again, is there a stay-at-home mom? Is there not? Is there kids there right now? I don't know. I'll move on to the next house.
So you have a section in there about how to combat clear your home. That seems like it'd be a pretty dangerous thing to do. I mean, under what circumstances would you want to do that? And under what circumstances would you not want to do that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that own guns, first of all, they know that, okay, I hear a noise or somebody kicks in my door, I'm grabbing my gun. I'm calling 911. And then that's kind of where it stops. So I wanted to make it very clear to people that, hey, there's a right and a wrong way of clearing your home if you choose to do so. And this is a very personal decision. This is for the alpha males out there. I mean, they're going to call them, priority is to get help and get it coming. But if help is 15 minutes away, or you live even more rural and help is 30 minutes away, well, then there's certain things you're going to have to do for yourself. And there's a lot of factors here, right? If you live alone, then sure, you're alone. You're an alpha kind of guy. I'm going to clear my house. I'm not running. But if you have family and kids, then obviously maybe, your primary plan is to get everybody out of the home into safety. But for those moments where you feel like you're going to clear the house, or you can't run, or you can't hide, or help isn't coming anytime soon, then I wanted to let people know, or at least show them and give them some guidance on how to pie doorways and how to pie corners properly, so that you're not putting yourself right in someone's sights. Because the goal with clearing your home is to clear it safely, where you can determine what the current security posture is. Make sure you are looking out for yourself first, and not put yourself right in someone's sights. So clearing a home isn't I wouldn't consider it advanced at all, but it's just giving some simple tactics on kind of the do's and the don'ts, and talking about the fatal funnel, and where people's eyes are attracted to, in a combat clearance situation, which is doorways, and you kind of want to stay out of the doorways. You want to pie them properly. You can look at a large percentage of a room just by pieing a certain way, and how you sidestep and how you leverage your gun in your field of view.
What do you mean by pieing?
You're basically slicing. If you're coming around a corner, you're using the corner, that wall, to one, conceal yourself, but by sidestepping away and you're not just button hooking around a corner and trying to TJ hooker it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, you're not trying to do that. You're literally dissecting the room while still leveraging the corner of a hallway or of a room to protect yourself and shield yourself, but still being able to dissect the room in pieces and clear it from head to toe. And it's hard to verbally describe it, and that's why the illustrations do such a great job, and along with the narrative.
Right. So another sort of similar to home invasion is carjacking. Is this a common thing, or is this becoming less common? And if it does happen to you, like, what do you do?
Yeah, this is more of a opportunistic, kind of predator's skill, right? And this is someone maybe on the run that's needs a vehicle, but it's also becoming. They're probably happening more often overseas than here in the U.S. So anybody who travels will benefit from some of those skills. But it's also happening at like ATM machines where to drive up ATM machines where you're more vulnerable. So there's three really scenarios that can happen. You're walking to your vehicle and somebody says, "Hey, give me your car, give me your keys." There's, the one that we think about the most is, you're driving, you stop at a red light, stop at a stop sign, all of a sudden there's a gun pointed at you at the driver's window. And then there's another tactic is coming in through the passenger door. All of a sudden somebody's sitting next to you with a gun to your head, where they're making you the driver. So there's different scenarios and different ways to deal with it. But the big takeaway is knowing that you're driving anywhere between a 4,000 to 6,000 pound weapon. And when you're talking about that external threat and you're in the cabin of your own vehicle, everyone needs to know that all terrain is drivable. And anytime you go to any of the offensive or defensive driving schools, you'll hear that more than anything else. All terrain is drivable. So what does that mean? Sidewalks, grass. You're not confined to the white and yellow lines. So you have to think kind of outside the box. We get kind of stuck. There's a sidewalk there. But you can drive right over that if you need to. But in order to take advantage of drivable terrain, you have to give yourself space. So when you're driving, especially maybe in high threat areas, or you're traveling overseas, or maybe you're doing business in Mexico City. It just kind of really depends where you're going and what you're doing, but you want to give yourself plenty of space between the vehicles in front of you and around you so that you can leverage that drivable terrain if somebody shows up at your driver's side window with a weapon. And so once you have that drivable terrain, now if a gun breaches that kind of the threshold of the driver's side door or window, you can trap that weapon and hit the gas at the same time. And when I say trap, literally you're grabbing that weapon and pushing it to the dashboard and then pushing the gas and driving out of there. That guy is not going to be able to do much as soon as you do that. And then, of course, once you start driving, keep driving and, get yourself out of danger, get yourself off the X. Right.
What happens in the event, say the guy gets in the car and got the gun to you? What should be your strategy then?
I always push, you're always looking for the first opportunity of escape. You never want to let yourself get to the second or third stop. That's when survivability and chances of escape become increasingly more complicated. So the sooner you can, literally, you don't even need to throw the thing in park, as soon as you can slow down, get out. If it's someone approaching you, like a parking garage situation, I put in there, you need a kind of a distractor and then increase distance, so whether that's throwing your keys, not necessarily at the guy, but throwing them off to the left and then you run right, it's a typical kind of juke left, go right movement. And this is where identifying cover becomes so important. We talk about cover as anything that stops bullets. Concealment is equivalent to the curtains in your home. You stand behind it. Yeah, you're hidden, but it's not going to stop a bullet. So, this is where, once again, going back to awareness, you're constantly kind of looking around, the difference between cover and concealment, and you want to always identify cover. And if you're in a parking garage situation, large structural pillars, you're throwing your keys one way, you're going to run from pillar to pillar to pillar, increasing distance between you and the threat. And if it's truly your car they want, give it up. I mean, that's number one. Just like your wallet, there's nothing more precious than your life. So give it up. It's insured, and just get the distance between you and them. Of course, if you're a concealed carry kind of guy, then, and the guy's already got the draw on you, well, at that point, you just have to decide, if you're going to take that risk as well and draw your weapon and blast the guy. But, sometimes for, the average guy that's doing business every day and doesn't carry any weapons, then throw your keys one way, you run the opposite, and get away from them.
So in the last book, the first book, you talked about active shooter situations, and you revisit again in this book. I'm curious, has anything changed from, the first time you wrote the book to what you put in the book this time around?
Well, this time, the first time around was kind of more holistic in nature. It was kind of like just run, hide, fight. And that's, a philosophy that I teach in my day job, and also, the FBI supports 100%. And, I got a lot of people out there that, have different acronyms, different things, but really it boils down to, running. If you can run, you should. Increasing your distance from a shooter is always a good thing. If you can hide, then hide behind things that stop bullets, and make sure when you hide, know that it's temporary. You don't want to be a sitting duck. And then, of course, fight. If you're going to fight as a team. Improvised weapons are everywhere. Use them. If you're going to take down someone, and that's where it rolls into, okay, now book 2. I talk about active shooter takedowns, how to trap that weapon, how to take someone down properly. It's basic MMA, macro, big motor movements, because fine motor movements aren't going to work under stress. So we want to be able to, you look at the bottom of the spine, the top of the spine. You have your head, you have your hips. And the way you control the body is either you control the hips or you control the head. So, one person is designated for head or hips, and then another person's designated for the weapon. I go through and illustrate just some examples. There's no right and wrong when it comes to this stuff. It's just win, 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 right? So, and then I took it a little bit further, and we're talking about theater shootings, stadium shootings. I kind of break down different tactics and giving people more tactical mindset, that you don't want to go with the flow necessarily when people start, panicking. Sometimes it's better to, obviously get down and ID the shooter, because the last thing you want to do is run towards fire, which a lot of people do when they panic, because they just hear the shots. They don't pay attention to where they came from. So I kind of start really digging down into some different tactics that people can leverage in different environments in the second book, which really boils down to the headlines. We keep hearing about it in the headlines. So this second book, I wanted to tackle everything that's in the headlines.
Right. So another skill you talk about, going back to cars, is a sinking car, right? You're driving, maybe a bridge collapse, and you're underwater in your car. How do you escape a sinking car?
Yeah, I still find it concerning and entertaining that, you watch the news and see people being swept away, by these flash floods. And it baffles me that people continue to think they can drive a vehicle through, potentially 5-knot current cruising across the street. It's the opposite of hydroplaning. It's the water pushing you instead of you sliding across. And I think people underestimate this stuff all the time. But it really can go bad very quickly. So I'm giving options to people. One, reroute. If there's traffic and everyone's trying to just, slowly motor across this, the rapids in front of them, don't be that guy. Go ahead, back up, reroute. There's always another route. But if you find yourself channelized, or the traffic's so bad you can't back up, or you didn't give yourself any drivable terrain, then okay, you or somehow things go bad and now you're being swept away. A glass break tool in your vehicle is number one, and have it in a compartment that you can get to. You don't want it sitting in the cup holder to where, any major hit and it's going to end up on the floorboard and you can't even reach the thing. Two, know that, hey, power windows, get them open, create the exits, sunroofs, create the exit. You have time as long as you can control the panic. Knowing the difference between your windshield and then the rest of the glass of the vehicle. It's two different kinds of glass. Don't waste your time trying to kick out a windshield or break it. It's better to go for your passenger or driver's side windows, break them and go out. Sunroofs, obviously, if you can go out that way. But then I go through, all right, now, okay, what's some other ways? There's the common sense ways, then there's some other ways. Your headrest, if you literally dislocate it, pull it out, and we actually got to do it where you take the headrest is really just two bars stuck down into the seat. You can remove the whole thing, and the bars have points on the end, or the rods, and you wedge it between the molding where you're at the bottom of your door, and when the glass meet, you kind of turn it into a fulcrum, stick it down in there, pull back, and boom, the glass will shatter and out you go. And it's important to note the two different kinds of glass, right? You have safety glass, which is your passenger windows, front and back, right? Driver's side windows, all your side windows. But your windshield is tempered. It's set to it's laminated, sorry, and so it's built to withstand projectiles flying at it. I mean, that's why the windshield is a much different kind of treated glass, and it's the last one that you want to try and shatter or break because it's very difficult. So always aim for like passenger driver's side windows when you talk about breaking a window and getting out. But ideally, you have these windows already open and you're giving yourself an easy means of escape, and understand the dynamics of a vehicle too. When you talk about deep water, the engine end of the vehicle is going to sink first, and you kind of want to get out of the vehicle and go away from the weight. So if you're in a sports car and your engine is in the rear, well, then you're going to get out and go towards the hood. And if your engine is, obviously in the front, like most vehicles, well, then you're going to get out and move towards the trunk. So there is some logic in all this, but, most people forget it under stress. That's why it's important to kind of think this stuff through, so that if it ever happens, you know what to do.
So another scenario that you covered in the book that I had never heard of before, that I thought was interesting, is this idea of virtual kidnappings. What's a virtual kidnapping, and how do you handle those?
Yeah, so these are on the rise. And what it is one big hoax. And it relies a lot on someone understanding or knowing your pattern of life. These days, we put our pattern of life all over social media. And that's why it's important not to post everything real time. No one needs to know that you're, at the airport right now, or no one needs to know that you're, on vacation, or that you're traveling abroad, because this is all pattern of life information that bad guys use, especially for virtual kidnappings. And just a couple of weeks ago in the national news was a mom who thought her daughter had been kidnapped. And so what these guys do, they'll call you up and they'll say, hey, we've got your daughter. And then they'll give you a series of directions and have you go around from ATM machine to ATM machine. And then you either give you a drop site or use some kind of, Western Union, money transfer. And they'll do that. And so they terrorized her basically for 5 hours straight. Here she's thinking her daughter had been kidnapped, when the reality is her daughter was still exactly where she was, and that was at school. But what these guys, and it's important to note, the difference between a real kidnapping and a virtual one. The virtual one, where no one's been kidnapped, but they have you believe that they've got your kid. And then you, of course, a parent that knows, loves their kid, or any concern whatsoever, is going to do what someone says on the other line. But just keep in mind, it's one big hoax. So knowing the differences between a real kidnapping and a virtual one is important. So a virtual one, they're going to keep you on the phone for as long as they can, because they don't want you to get off the phone and check in with your loved one. Whereas a real kidnapping, they're going to call you from your daughter's phone, just to, that sends the message. Okay, it's a call from my daughter's phone, and it's someone else on the line saying, I have your daughter. And they're going to keep their phone calls very short. So caller ID and time on the phone are big indicators of whether you're dealing with a real world event or a hoax. Okay. Second, the amount of money they ask for. If they're asking for, hey, go to ATM machines and pull out a couple $100 here and there, you might get $1,000 out of it. It's probably virtual, because a real kidnapper, they're relying on big money. So they're not spending a lot of time on the phone because they don't want to be tracked, traced. And then they're asking for big numbers. They're probably going to ask for, have you drop it at a drop site. And then with the virtual, they'll use a lot of like social engineering and just psychology and play on your emotions. And that's really what it is one big emotional hoax. And they'll tell you, hey, we're watching you. We're going to watch you when you go to the ATM machine. We're watching you the whole time. If you hang up, we're going to kill your daughter. It's a horrible event, but it's becoming more and more popular now. And so this is where it goes back to social media. You don't need to post what you're doing when you're doing it, especially if you're flying from New York to London. Everyone knows that's a 5-hour flight. That's 5 hours that a loved one cannot communicate with you. And these guys are pretty smart. They won't go deal with the mom and the dad. They'll hit the grandmother or the grandfather and work them, because they're going to be a little probably further disconnected from what the loved one has actually got going on, and they're going to do nothing but believe this person because they're older and they think it's real, and they're probably easier to trick. So anyway, the book breaks all this down and illustrates it, with great illustrations, kind of depict the difference between the two.
Right. Well, hey, Clint, there's a lot more we could talk about. I mean, like I said in the book, or at the beginning of the podcast, you talk about how to survive in desert situations, Arctic, on a deserted island, things like that. So where can people find out more about the book and your work?
All of the links to buy the book is at 100deadlyskills.com. That's 100deadlyskills.com. And the book is sold where all books are sold. I mean, whether it's you're at the airport or Barnes & Noble, you can pick one up. I highly recommend actually getting the book, because they're built to withstand blood and water.
No, yeah, it's a nice. It feels like a survival manual.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Clint, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thank you, Brett.
My guest today was Clint Emerson. He's the author of the book 100 Deadly Skills, Survival Edition. You can find that on Amazon.com and bookstores everywhere. You can find out more information about the book at 100deadlyskills.com. Also, check out the show notes at aom.is/deadlyskills, where you can find links to resources where you can delve deeper into this topic.